The next item on the agenda is a staff report, item 13.1.1. This is the district boundary review and phase 2 presentation. So, we'd like to ask Ian McLean and Liam McSween. I guess Liam will be stepping forward for this one.
Thank you very much, and good evening, members of Northwest Community Council, and good evening all of you folks who come up from the public to view our presentation on Phase 2 of the 2022 District Boundary Review. My name is Liam McSween. I'm the Elections and Special Projects Manager with the Municipal Clerk's Office. With me this evening is Kate Sullivan, a member of our District Boundary Resident Review Panel. John Ariel at the back, who'll be coming up to give you more of a presentation, take you through the proposed districts in the next little bit. John is also a member of our District Boundary Resident Review Panel. And Ian McLean, our municipal clerk, who is in the back there, providing support. So today, we are here through Community Council to the public on the district boundary review process. This has been adopted by the Executive Standing Committee as a way to engage on Phase 1 of the district boundary review. And we've prepared a presentation for you today that speaks to Phase 2. So thank you very much for having us here this evening. So a little bit of background. The Municipal Government Act, or the MGA, requires that all municipalities in Nova Scotia conduct a review on the number of boundaries and polling districts in the municipality on a regular basis. Council makes an application to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, which will make the final decision on municipal polling districts and boundaries. The most recent review was conducted in 2014, and the resulting district boundaries are currently in effect. A district boundary review is required in 2022, and changes coming from this review will not come into effect until the 2024 municipal election. The review is broken down into 2 phases. Phase 1, in the spring of 2022, the first phase of the district boundary review study was undertaken in HRM with the aim of determining the number of municipal polling districts appropriate to the municipality, as well as a review of the governance structure of HRM. The results of that initial phase recommended that the number of polling districts and councillors for the municipality should remain at 16. This was a decision made by Halifax Regional Council at its June 14th meeting, June 14th, 2022. Phase 2 sets specific boundaries. It aims to gather opinions from residents of HRM about proposed new district boundaries for the 16 districts. Councillors on the Halifax Regional Council each represent an average of approximately 23,000 electors. The public engagement activities are led by the District Boundary Resident Review Panel, who is a panel comprised of volunteers with specific competencies in planning and governance and administration. And these folks their mandate is to advise Halifax Regional Council on the district boundaries specifically for Phase 2. There are different ways that the boundaries of districts can be determined within the municipality, and there are 5 different criteria that must be considered when creating the district. One thing I should mention before we get into the proposed districts and the proposed recommended boundaries is that the proposed amendments of polling boundaries do not impact municipal services. They don't impact taxation, area rates, school boundaries, or emergency services. So I just want to make that very, very clear off the bat. So none of those aspects are impacted by proposed boundary review. It's representation around the council table. So just a little bit about the requirements that some of the factors that the District Boundary Resident Review Panel will take into consideration when looking at proposed boundary changes. There's 5 criteria, and they're set out in Section 368, Sub 4 of the Municipal Government Act. And that's the number of electors, and that is how many electors each councillor represents per district. Relative parity of voting power, that is all districts have roughly the same number of electors, so that each vote carries the same weight. In considering relative parity of voting power, the target variance is plus or minus 10% per district. And there's a distinction here. This isn't population, this is number of electors. So these are people who are registered to vote. So 18 years of age, Canadian citizen, and an ordinary resident of the Halifax municipality for 6 months. So voter parity of up to plus or minus 25% is permitted in some circumstances with appropriate justification. And this is a role of the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. So the 10% number, you're going to see it, and it's going to factor into some of the decisions that were made, but it's not the be-all and end-all. However, if you move up to that 25% parity, voting parity number, the more justification is required. to make that happen. And that's usually along the lines of things that communities of interest and those types of things. Population density, that is the number of people per square kilometer living in a district. Communities of interest is a very sort of broad term, but it includes existing communities, historical connections, recreational issues, tax and area rates, water and sewer boundaries, traffic infrastructure and patterns, planning boundaries, school districts, shopping patterns, business centers, language, ethnic origin, those types of things. Geographic size is the final requirement, and that is districts that are defined by geographic features and geographic sizes of each district. So these are the requirements that the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board looks for in terms of the application that was submitted by Halifax Regional Council. The District Boundary Resident Review Panel, as I mentioned, is a citizen-led volunteer panel created to advise Regional Council through Executive Standing Committee on the boundaries of the municipal electoral districts for the municipality as part of Phase 2 of Council's process to develop its application to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board for the 2022 District Boundary Review. The District Boundary Resident Review Panel is responsible for conducting the public engagement activities for Phase 2 with the support of HRM staff, and that's why we're here today. One of the things that I will mention here is that this is very much a process of the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, so there are public engagement activities and ways to provide your feedback here, but there'll also be a process when this application goes to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board as well too. So they look at, they set their own public hearings and those types of things, so there's lots of opportunities to engage along the way. What you're going to see tonight are proposals. They're draft proposals. They're not in effect. They're very much for public engagement purposes, so we can gather feedback from folks that are most represented by this. Phase 2 public consultation. This is a little bit more of the process. So the District Boundary Resident Review Panel presents the proposed boundary changes to the public for feedback, where we're at right now. The panel receives a report on the public feedback from Narrative Research, who are our partners. We're doing simultaneous meetings, and there's also an online survey that has been developed by Narrative that I'm sure a lot of folks in this room have already had a chance to take a look at. And this is all a way for us to gather feedback. They're going to submit a report on the public feedback to the District Boundary Resident Review Panel. The next step is revisions to the proposed boundaries are to be made based on the public feedback. The panel submits its final report and recommendation on Phase 2 to the Executive Standing Committee by its November 28th meeting. And the Executive Standing Committee then forwards a recommendation to Regional Council. Regional Council receives the report from the panel and from the Executive Standing Committee and makes a final decision on the proposed boundary changes. And this happens in December 2022. The deadline for the application is December the 31st. There we go. Population growth. So one of the things that, beyond those 5 criteria, the 5 criteria that are mentioned in the Municipal Government Act, population growth. It will influence the boundary review process now and in future years. And increases in population do not happen equally across the HRM. So we'll see this a little bit more. Some of the factors that the panel looked into as well is future growth. We know we've had certainly a lot of data and a lot of information shared with our planning and development folks, as well as some of those special planning areas that have been designated by the province. So looking at things like the regional plan and a lot of our planning documentations to sort of pinpoint where future growth is going to happen and factor that in for the next few years. To come up with some of the boundary adjustments. It's not the only criteria that we have to look at, but it is something that has been looked at by the panel as well. In considering the relative parity of voting power, that all districts have roughly the same number of electors and each vote carries the same weight. As I mentioned before, the target variance is plus or minus 10%, but there is an opportunity for up to plus or minus 25%. But again, the more you deviate from that 10% number, the more justification that has to be provided. So the current population and number of electors since 2010, so that was the last major review that was done. The HRM has grown by 67,392 residents to a total of 440,071. So creeping up on that 500,000 number. The Halifax Regional Municipality is in the top 6 of the 25 largest municipalities in Canada with a 9.1% population growth rate from 2016 to 2021. So I'm going to turn it over to John Ario from the panel, who's going to come up and speak a little bit about the current district number of electors and population by 2024.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Liam. Appreciate the opportunity to come. I want to first start by thanking the members of council for appointing us. There are 6 members on our panel, and I've got Kate over here, 4 more folks outside of who's down here tonight. But it's been a great opportunity for us to be part of this work in general. So myself, I live in Bedford South, and moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario last year. And I love everything about Bedford except the property tax. I just want to put it out there. Everything else is fine.
Higher or lower?
So I just want to thank staff for their support on this work. But essentially, as Liam has mentioned, we're looking into that plus a 10 in terms of percentage, in terms of where that can go back and forth, or up to that 25% with very strong justification for it. So for the District 1, Electoral District 1, we're looking at, currently the population, number of electors in 2021 is 18,642, and right now we're projecting that by 2024 to become about 19,589. So that will be about, the variance will be about minus 19%, 19.9%. We go to District number 2, we're looking at about 3.2% in terms of the variance. And then we go to district number 3, that is about plus 11.6% in District 3. District 4, it's minus 9.4%, and then in District 5, 8.6, District 6, minus 6%, District 7, plus 15.2%, and then District 8, that will be 9.6%. Again, we're talking about the variance between the current electoral count to what that will look like in 2024. District 9, that will be about 6.2% variance change to the positive. And then in District number 10, that will be about minus 1.4%. District 11, looking at about 1.6%. District number 12, 10%. And then minus 5% for 13. And 14 will be about 12%, minus 12. And District number 15, minus 8.9%. And then we look at the current District number 16, plus 16.1%. And that growth is also very evident, even Bedford area where I live. Everybody looks around, they see what is going on, the population growth that Liam mentioned. That is a good thing, but at the same time, it's also important to be planning for the future as we're discussing currently. So next slide, please. So proposed district. So this is District A, right? So you can see what that is looking like. Next slide, please. Actually, I'll be able to explain what that looks like. Because sometimes when you look at a large map, you're trying to figure out where the boundaries are. But this is more, we can get into the explanation here better. Proposed District A will encompass most communities in the existing District number 1 and 2, with the exception of the following suburban communities: Fall River to Windsor Junction, Fletcher's Lake, Waverly, Lakeview, Montague, Gold Mines, Mineville, North Preston, and East Preston. I'm still learning how to pronounce all the towns in Nova Scotia. And also the district is comprised primarily of rural communities which have similar needs and infrastructure, recreation and municipal services. The proposed electoral district is slightly over that 10% variance that we've mentioned before, bringing that to 26,665 electors. However, it could be justified given the limited amount of growth anticipated in the next 10 years within that particular district. District B, you can also see the district map that has been proposed. Again, these are all proposals, so you can see the difference that we're not using District 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. We're using A, B, C because it's a proposal. And that also will encompass some of the District 2, 3, and 4, and 6. including North Preston, East Preston, Mineville, Westfall, Sherbrooke, Loon Lake, and parts of Cole Harbour and Dartmouth. The proposed elector count falls within that plus to minus 10%. The variance being at, the number actually being at 24,144. That allows for future growth. That will bring together the historic African Nova Scotian communities in North Preston, East Preston, Westfall, Sherbrooke, and Loon Lake into one district. I was actually one of our members. I was on the panel. No, I was one of the members of our panel that was went to North Preston to present this last time. That was very well received from the community to ensure that the communities of African Nova Scotians can be brought together relatively within one area. So that was a very good feedback that we got from that district. Next, please. So that's the map for proposed District C. I'll just go straight to bullet number 2. So we're looking at about 10 plus or minus 10 variants. The variance itself, our number of electors will be about 21,407. It's also that allows for future growth that is anticipated within the District C. And the proposed district allows existing community planning and social and school boundaries, and also considers other communities of interest that Liam has already laid out at the beginning. Next, please. Okay, next. District C also will encompass portions of existing District 3 and 5 in Dartmouth. The proposed district considers communities of interest with the boundaries following existing community, planning and school boundaries, maintaining generally urban communities. The estimated electoral count is slightly below the plus or minus 10 that we're working with. The variance will be, the total number of electors will be about 19,843 that will allow for future growth and development that is anticipated in the years to come. District E. See the map? Perfect. And then next. And this has to do the current District E, the proposed E now includes the communities that have been removed from the current District 1, as you can see. And the district also considers communities of interest, including by linking these urban communities outside of Dartmouth with those of Falls River, Fletcher's Lake, as well as Windsor Junction. This is also slightly below the plus or minus 10 variance, about 20,366, but this is also being recommended due to the significant growth that is expected within the Port Wallace special planning area. So District F, and then next. That will also encompass portions of existing District 5 and 6 in Dartmouth. The estimated number of electors falls within that plus or minus 10 variance at about 22,503, and allows for also room for future growth that is anticipated with several higher order residential special planning area designations. The also proposed district considers established communities of interest following school and community boundaries. That's what G looks like. Next. And that also encompasses most existing District 7 in downtown Halifax, and also south end of the peninsula, with more minor adjustments along the Jubilee Road and Clogswell Street. The estimated number of electors also falls within the range that we're working with, plus or minus 10, and we're looking at about 23,716. That also allows for future growth that is anticipated. It also incorporates established communities of interest, including planning and school boundaries. This is H, and that also, H itself encompasses most of the existing District 6, District 8, and a portion of the current District 7. Specifically, around southern boundary has been moved to Cobdwell Street, and the western boundary has also been moved to Windsor Street up to Bears Road, which also continues west to Connaught Street northwards. Also, that falls within the variance of plus or minus 10. We're looking at about 21,655 electors. That also allows for future growth that is anticipated. Also considers the communities of interest, including schools and planning boundaries. So I'll call my colleague, panel member, Kate, to come up and take us through. Should I keep going? Oh, perfect. So this guy that also incorporates, that includes the portions of existing District 7, 8, 9, and 11. And the range also falls within the plus or minus 10 that we've been looking at. And we have a number that is about 22,356 that also allows for future growth and development. That also considers the communities of interest that we've talked about, including things like urban and downtown communities.
Liam, you just switch that back. I just want to change that last bullet. It should say proposed district.
J, see the map, and then we go to J itself. The variance we're looking at, that also falls within the plus or minus 10 for District J. The variance itself, it is about 24, number of electors, 24,989 electors, allowing also for future growth and development, which is now projected to increase substantially. Population density, there's a dense population within the more urban areas mixed with this burst, suburban and rural community. Also considers community of interest, including school and planning boundaries. That is K. And that also incorporates existing portions of our District 11 and 12 and 13. And it also falls within that plus or minus 10 variance at about 24,598 in terms of projection. And that also keeps communities of interest into focus, as well as keeping rural and urban coastal communities together. District L, and that also incorporates most of the current District 12 with the exception of a portion of the community of Timberley west of 9 Mile River. Proposed district also covers communities of Lakeside, Beachville, Otter Lake, and a portion of Halifax West. Also falls within the plus or minus 10 variance. We're looking at about 21,484 electors that will also allow for future growth. Considers communities of interest, including existing community and school and planning boundaries. You can see the M. That also incorporates some of the current District 10, excluding the areas of Kearney Lake to the west of Highway 102. And the southern border of the district now sits on School Avenue. Falls within the plus or minus 10 variance at about 22,806 electors. That allows for future growth. Also considers those communities of interest that we've talked about, including keeping suburban communities together, aligned with common interest. District N. It also incorporates the current District 13, 14, and 16. And the proposed boundary now includes all of the Lucasville together within that particular district. Estimated number of electors falls within the plus of 10 variance at about 25,597 electors that also allow for future growth. Considers communities of interest by linking the historic African and Nova Scotian communities of Lucasville and Upper Hamilton Springs all together. District O. That also incorporates portions of existing District 1, 13, and 14. And the variance there is also falls within the plus or minus 10 variance at about 25,324. It also allows for future growth and also considers communities of interest, school and planning boundaries, as well as keeping suburban communities together. District P. District P also encompass P, right? I was counting the alphabet to make sure we're at P, right? So encompass the portions of District 10, 13, as well as the majority of District 16. That also includes the community of Bedford and a portion of Halifax. And the estimated count falls within the plus to minus 10, and we're looking at about 25,279 electors. They also allow for future growth. Also considers communities of interest, including the school and planning boundaries.
And so thank you very much. I'll pick up where John left off here. This is a chart that shows the proposed district and the estimated number of electors, that plus or minus 10% variance for voter parity. Not going to go through each one in detail because John did that through the slides, but you'll notice slightly over at 14.7%. Part of the rationale for the panel putting that number forward is that those suburban communities or those rural communities are not going to experience the same level of growth as some of our urban and suburban urban and suburban communities. So keeping the elector just slightly over the high range of 25,589 at 14.7% is likely justified given the limited amount of potential growth that we're going to see in those areas over the next few years. I will just draw your attention to the other chart on the side. Your average number of electors with the proposed districts is based on 2021 census data, is 23,263. So that's our average number of electors per district. The high range being 25,589 and the low range being 20,936. So you can see a couple in District D and E, which are slightly below. These are some of the areas in Dartmouth that are seeing a lot of higher order residential growth and are really impacted by some of those special planning areas. So your Port Wallaces and your Dartmouth Cove and your Penhorn Mall and all those where we're going to see significant amount of growth over the next few years, a lot of shovel-ready projects ready to go. So the elector count is slightly below that 10%. Just a little bit of the rationale why you see the numbers like that. Likewise, when you get through here, it corresponds where growth is anticipated. Gets a little bit more challenging when we get down to P, which is the Bedford West area. So we're creeping up to that 10% number there. And one of the challenges that the panel has done a very good job with is looking at some of those areas and trying to make it work within those parameters that they have from the UARB. So again, this is just an overview of what John just presented, but good to see it in a chart form. In terms of population summary, on average, HRM's councillors represent 27,604 residents. Important to note that. I know the UARB looks at electors, but it's very good to know the number of residents per district on average, and 23,602 electors per district. By 2024, the average number of electors are projected to grow to 388,861, or 24,291 per district. And again, that's the average. As we know, that growth doesn't happen equally based on where people are moving and coming to the municipalities. So big challenge in trying to spread that growth. So we're nearing the end of the presentation. I wanted to, the purpose of this session here tonight is to hear specifically from the public. So I've got a few questions that we'd like to put out there before we move into public speakers. So given what you've heard this evening, how do you feel about the newly proposed districts? To what extent do you agree or disagree with the placement of the new boundaries? And keeping in mind the 5 criteria listed in section 368 of the MGA, what changes should be considered to the proposed boundaries to make them more effective? So we're going to open up the floor for folks to come up and speak, and if you'd like to be, we're recording this meeting, and we've got minutes being taken, and this is going to go off to our consultant to include in the report back to the boundaries. So we want as specific as you possibly can. Let us know your thoughts, because we're incredibly interested to hear them. Just a little bit more before we get in there, just on how you can continue to engage. So we have the public engagement survey, which is up by Narrative Research. It's run from October 11th to October 25th, 2022. Council, I don't have a updated count today, but as of Friday, we were up to over 500 completed surveys. And I would expect that to grow a little bit over the weekend there. And so we'll follow back with an updated report. Public information meetings, obviously we're sitting in one tonight, but they've been held from October 11th to October the 24th. Couldn't get to all 16 districts, but we tried to spread out as much as we possibly can to the urban, rural, and suburban communities of HRM, and then of course using our community councils to get that catchment. You can continue to correspond with the District Boundary Resident Review Panel, so if you have another thought that you're not able to convey to us this evening, we would love it if you'd reach out and by email, send us your thoughts at clerks@halifax.ca so we can get that off to the panel. Public participation, you can come and join a District Boundary Resident Review Panel meeting for October and November. Public participation is on the agenda, just like Community Council, for each one of those meetings. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and get your feedback. Also, there's public participation at the Executive Standing Committee in October and November. The Executive Standing Committee is looking after the District Boundary Review process. And of course, they are the reporting body for the District Boundary Resident Review Panel. So you can certainly forward your comments along to them, or come and join a meeting and speak during public participation. That said, too, when we get into to submitting an application and finalizing a proposal and all that there'll be another process as well from the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to the chair for public participation.
Thank you very much, Liam. And I'd like to, before we go any further, I'd like to thank everybody in the District Boundary Review Panel. I understand how much work you have put into this, the number of options that you've looked at, and the difficulty with which you have tried to balance everything that was important coming into this. So we will proceed with the public participation, and as the first...
Question on process.
Question on process?
On process, if you would mind.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I don't know if maybe Ian or Liam could speak to this. Is this a public hearing that the committee is holding in District 16 tonight in Northwest Community Council, or is this, are you presenting to Community Council as well, meaning that Community Council could also ask questions and make comments? Because I certainly have questions and comments. So is this a time for me as well, or do I shut up and take time later and listen to people, or is it both?
I think, thank you very much, Councilor. We're certainly open for questions and clarification as well, but I think given the amount of folks that we have in the room tonight, it might be good to hear from the public first, and then we can certainly stick around and answer any
I
questions.
just wasn't quite sure on the position.
That's the main point is to gather feedback from the folks in the community.
With that, thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. And that is exactly where I was going to go. That we would hear from members of the public first, and then members of the council would be able to ask any questions of clarification as well afterwards. So I have a list of names in front of me, and as I call your name, I will read your name and the next two names, just so that you have a heads up that your name is going to be coming. When I read your name, please approach the mic, and you would have 5 minutes to speak. Please keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed towards the chair. You will have 5 minutes, and then after we get through the entire list of names, I'll ask if there is anybody else in the room who would like to make a public statement or a presentation about this, and you will also have 5 minutes, and then I'll call for 3 times to see if there is anybody else.
James Simon. I'm in Kathy's riding. I think I made a little bit of a mistake here, because I remember when I was here in 2014 that we were here for a UARB meeting, I thought, and that's where we had various representatives there who could go and address it. I see now, I'm glad to see there's a face on some of the people who've actually drawn on the maps. So maybe they can answer some of my questions instead. So as you would say, I'm from Lakeview, and there's a lot of people here from Lakeview, by the way. I would like to know what were the criteria to remove Lakeview from its district. You had 5 different criteria. They don't match at all for removal. Now, because I've lived in Lakeview for 40-some years, this is about the 4th time now I've been in the situation where we have been removed, proposed to go to Sackville. We always have to go to these meetings. We have to go and sit there, go over the same thing every single time. We're very frustrated about the whole thing. Lakeview is part of the LWF Ratepayers Association. Lakeview, Windsor Junction, Fall River. We are part of the Fall River Visioning, which was going on by the city for years and years. We had to go and work through this whole process. Our schools are there, our sports, our community of interest is there. Lakeview is a small community, which is adjacent to Sackville, but we don't have any sort of, although we drive through there at times and even shop at times. But what happens is that we are not the same community. And that's my main point. One of the things that I hear all the time, that these boundaries will have no impact on school boundaries. And that's incorrect. Because what happens is, for example, in one of these previous meetings, Stonemount, which you're aware of, Mr. Chair, put forward a petition asking to make sure that the boundary was adjusted to go and allow them to go to the Sackville schools. Okay, at the time, many of those lots were actually empty. It was a developer who wanted that there. And so what we now have is a single lot on Lakeview Road, which is now in the Sackville riding. That makes no sense. And I think I'll let somebody else go and speak.
Janet Craig. I've lived in Lakeview for 38 years. I agree 100% with what Jim has said. Our concern is we do not want to go to Lakeview, or we do not want to go to Lower Sackville. I'll just leave it at that.
I live in Oakfield, and I must say I've lived in Oakfield, Fall River area for a long time, for the last probably 17 years. I also lived in Lake Macmac, and I look at it, for me, with my family growing up within this particular area, we fall in love with the Fall River District area. And for us to not be a part of the Fall River area and be elected into another zone completely out of our zone in which we're in this particular section, the water runs down through the valley, right through Grand Lake, which picks up Lake Macmac, well, not so much Bannock, but from Lake Charles onward, it comes our way. And we want to have the voice within that to be able to control what takes place within those zones. And that's why I'm here tonight to just speak on that. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Actually, my wife put my name on the list. However, I'll just make a few comments. I do agree with Mr. Simon's approach to this whole thing. We've lived in Lakeview for almost 30 years. It's a tight little community. We want it to remain that way. We don't really want to be associated with Sackville or Lower Sackville. But as I understand it, over the years, the community has been eroded. The boundaries have been eroded for Lakeview. And I think Jim just mentioned a typical case where the developers have actually managed somehow to erode our boundary lines to almost until we got one street virtually now in the area. Now this is unfair because I know that there was no consultations, as far as I know, to move those boundaries out. So now we're getting a little opportunity. We're all very apprehensive about this new boundary mark because it always seems to be that we're going to be pushed into Sackville, and the community does not want it. at least from the feedback I get. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
We've been through this umpteen times before. Somebody took a Sharpie, won't mention any names, and crossed the 102 highway to loop Lakeview into the Sackville district. We are not a community of growth. Lakeview is limited. They're not making any more real estate in Lakeview. So there is no potential growth there as far as electors are concerned. It's going to stay exactly the way it is. Why you would take us in such a circuitous route to put it into Sackville, which already seems to have 26,000 electors, is beyond us. Our community of interest has always been Lakeview, Windsor Junction, Fall River. We've been in the LWF for a long time. Lakeview has been around since 1891, and I'm sure one of our attendees, Mr. McLean, could tell you how many times the Lakeview sign was pulled up out of the ground on Cowaquid Road and moved back and forth. You'll hear about it.
Good evening. I thought it was a tennis sheet also, but I'll say 4 anyway. Just historically, I think Lakeview's always been part of Windsor Junction, Fall River, Waverly area, so to take it away from that doesn't make sense. When I looked at the criteria of communities of interest, it doesn't seem to fit that. You're taking Lakeview away from these communities that it's always been part of. So I don't think that was really considered going through that. So like I said, it doesn't make sense to move it now. And that's all I had to say.
I was just following what my brother did and signed this sheet. But I grew up in Lakeview, and my dad is considered like the mayor of Lakeview because he lives line. It was a wonderful community growing up. We got to go to school in Waverly and Fall River. Loved the area. And what's happening here, it looks like you're just going by numbers and percentages and not talking with the people. We don't want to be in Sackville. We just want Lakeview. So I'll just say it sounds like some malarkey and fuddle-duddle, and conclusion, don't do it.
I guess I'm the old timer of Lakeview and I've been around quite a while. Like where our community was south of Sucker Brook. Lakeview was formed in 1891. Planned town of Lakeview. So now it's been pushed apart by different communities. First off, the sign went into, the hill. Then it goes down, you go across there. Now it comes to Lakeview Road. Now you're taking everything away from us. Our historical background is with Windsor Junction, Fall River. Everything's there. Our schools, our community center, our churches. I mean, this has been going on for 100 years. And why take it away from us? We have no likeness to go into Sackville because that ruins our historical history and everything. We've always been in schools and hockey and sports and everything. And it's the LWF and even the Lakeview LWF Fire Hall, the old community hall, that was formed by residents from Lakeview, Fall River, Windsor Junction way back in the early 1960s. You're going to take that away from us? Just so I'd like to see the board. I'd like to do just a suggestion for your board. Go up Cowaquid Road. You're even on Windsor Junction Road now. You pushed Windsor Junction way back too. Anyway, so you should go up to Cowaquid Road, and there's a lot 841. I think it's the pond is just behind it, and you could take your boundary across that pond. Right across that wetlands, right to the highway, and then go down. And leave the rest of Lakeview alone. Let them have Lakeview. To the older residents that always live there. And if you can do that, I think that would please everybody. Thank you.
Chair, I just have to ask, is this the mayor of Lakeview?
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
I'm Janet Lugar Miller, and I'm originally from what I call Old Bedford. Old Bedford was where everybody knew your name, to coin a phrase. Everybody knew everybody. You always knew who they were, either you were rowing down a river or you were walking on the road, and you knew everyone. So when I became slightly older and moved, I wanted to find a place that was going to be just like that. And I found Lakeview. I'm a retired teacher, and one of the reasons that I wanted to move to Lakeview is because of the small schools, Elsie, Scarry, and Waverly Memorial, because of the community spirit. My idea of Lakeview really is, it's not Lakeview, it's LWF, as you've heard countless number of times. It's not that we don't want to be part, or I'm not going to say for everybody else, but for me, it's not I don't want to be part of Sackville or anywhere else. It's just that Lakeview is home. It's home to everyone. We have our community page, as I know many of the communities do. However, on our community page, we all know each other. We all know each other's names. Canada Day. On Canada Day, everybody dresses up. I don't know why, but we all dress up. The children get their bicycles, and sometimes the adults. We meet at what used to be an old school, which is now the Waverly Search and Rescue, which is extremely well known, and it's ours. And notice it's called the Waverly Search and Rescue, in the middle of Lakeview. Just want to mention that. I'm not going to take too much time, but on our Canada Day, when we meet at that hall, and we all start parading down from the hall to our little community park, which is open to the public, except we claim it for 2 hours on Canada Day. And the children wave and wave to everyone, except no one's there to wave to because we're all in the parade. We really do love our community. We all are connected to all the different communities around us, but it's almost like it's kin, it's family. We've been a gold mining town. If you look in the history of Lakeview, Lakeview was a gold mining town, which helped with Waverly, who was where the gold was. We have trails that go from our area all the way through, beautiful trails. We're connected to that. And to be quite honest, councillors, we're a family. Thank you. Please keep us the same. Addendum. I'm supposed to be speaking for my husband, Terry Miller, who thought it was attendance, and there's no way he would speak in a microphone. Also, we have a new neighbor who came who was so excited because he's so passionate about Lakeview and was so excited to come here. That would be Jeff O'Connell, and he said, I'm not speaking either.
Thank you, Janet, for speaking on behalf of Terry and Jeff.
So Barry Dalrymple, and I'm not from Lakeview, but I'm here to speak about Lakeview. So, as context, I'm about to turn 70 years old. I was born in Fall River. I grew up in Windsor Junction. I've lived 23 years in Wellington and the last 7 in Waverly. I currently belong to the LWF Ratepayers Association, the LWF Community Hall, the LWF Firemen's Association, LWF Minor, but I can go on. It's LWF, Lakeview, Windsor Junction, Fall River. It has always been. It's been, Keith, over 100 years. It just always has been. It is so intertwined. The only criteria for taking Lakeview out of the current district is the one about population. Every other criteria in there, especially the one about area rates, school zones, recreation, every other single criteria puts Lakeview in with Fall River, Waverly, Windsor Junction, Wellington, Grand Lake. They're all together. They've always been together. And by the way, I do notice the error in the presentation, Liam, all apologies, where it says the suburban communities outside Dartmouth. We're not suburban. None of us are suburban. We're rural. And if you think that we're not rural, maybe look at the services we get for HRM as compared to suburban and urban. We're rural. We're all rural. So I also want to put Wellington, Grand Lake, and Oakfield in the same context as Lakeview. They're all the same. All the community halls are linked. All the sports organizations are linked. All the kids go to the same schools, junior high and high school, and on and on and on. Those communities are linked. So I was on, by the way, I was an HRM counselor for 8 years. I was on the last district boundary review committee. I understand the provincial, the URB wants numbers. We're people. We don't care about numbers. So if you want to even up the numbers, but keep every other criteria in that pamphlet, move a little tiny bit of the district further into Dartmouth. A little tiny bit. Not what's proposed. A little tiny bit further into Dartmouth. Leave the rest of the district as it is, and you have your numbers, and you can leave all the communities of interest as they are. So I can't stress enough. I know the district well. I was an RCMP officer in Enfield that looked after most of this district. I was an HRM counselor for 8 years that looked after most of this district. I know every boundary review, it's easy to kick Lakeview around because it's a small community, and who cares if we move a few numbers over there? Well, the people care. So, and like I say, follow your own criteria that you have in that brochure and pamphlet. Keep those communities of interest together. The core communities, Waverly, Lakeview, Windsor Junction, Fall River, Lake Fletcher, Wellington, Grand Lake, and Oakview.
Yes.
I'll go one step further. I'd love to see the Muscatawbin Valley left in the district as well, only because it's been kicked around too. They moved at the last district boundary review. They moved at the district boundary review before that. They're tired of being kicked around. Leave them alone. Leave them in the district. Like I said, if you want to fix the numbers, move just a tiny bit further into Dartmouth. Leave the rest of the district as it is. Leave the representation. I can't stress enough. These are, when you say communities of interest, communities of similarity, we are all those. All of those communities. We are rural. We're proud to be rural. And we want to remain together and united because we are so intertwined in everything we do every single day. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, from being part of the boundary review the last time, I absolutely thank you as volunteers. I know only too well how difficult this job is. I don't want to, well, I'll tell you flat out. So 8 years ago, we went through the same process. We worked our asses off and went to all the meetings, all the public consultation and everything else. And by the way, the URB board took our report, threw it in the garbage, and drew their own map. And Liam, I'm sure, can tell you that.
Can I say something? We got the numbers. Mill Sackville has about 5,000 more numbers than
They got more.
They got more numbers.
And actually, I know 30 seconds. I'm glad you reminded me of that because I think your growth projections are way off. The Burnside connector is about to be built in the next year. The Wellington connector is under construction. There is growth coming in the Fall River Waverly area that's just off the charts. Wellington, when that connector gets finished in another year and a half, I've seen in advance all the huge giant development proposals for that area. We'll get there with population before 2024.
Hello, my name is Louise Mark, and I have lived, and I'm very proud to say I've lived in Lakeview for 30 years. My husband and I brought 2 children up. The kids went through sports, they went through schools, they went through church, they went through, out of school activities. People have already mentioned tonight things I was going to say, so I agree with everything that has been said. But it's very true. We know our neighbors. We know if our neighbors need help or assistance or would like a phone call. And it's not done on a rota. It's not done with a committee calling you. Can you do this? Can you do that? It's spontaneous. We know our neighbors. I know the faces here. People know me. It was very interesting to see, and it was mentioned, but how communities were kept together because of similarities. While Lakeview wasn't kept with, according to this proposal, Lakeview is not with its neighbours and peers, who it should be. Lakeview is not very big. I don't know if any, Kathy will have been, I don't know who else has been to Lakeview. Lisa? Yeah, right. It's, as a friend said tonight, it's got 2 streets and 2 cul-de-sacs. It's small, but it's mighty. And tonight, you hear us. So thank you for your time, and I'd just like to say I'm not happy with the proposal, and I would like us merged with the others. Thank you.
So sorry for my spelling, it's Sue Kelso, but I'm on the list because Jim told me I had to put my name on the list. But I just want to say that my partner and I moved there 5 years ago, and when we were looking for a place coming from the Wolfville area, we found Wolfville a little bit small, but we had lived in Ottawa prior to that and found that we didn't want to be in a big city area. We wanted a small community. And we were looking in Windsor Junction, Fall River, and Lakeview. And we went for LWF. I didn't want to be in Lower Sackville. I don't want to be in Lower Sackville. I will not be in Lower Sackville. And so the boundaries that are, as of right now, is what needs to be kept. It's a beautiful community on the water, and and we use all of the facilities in WLF. So I agree with everything that everybody said. And as a newcomer to the area, I've only been there just almost 5 years. This is exactly what I was looking for, or we were looking for, and we don't want it moved, so thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And, well, yeah, I'm one of those ones, my name accidentally ended up on the attendance list, but that's okay. So, but I am here tonight. I am a resident of Lakeview, as my partner said, and I'm here with my family from Lakeview. And they have spoken from the heart. They have spoken factually. They're putting everything on a platter tonight. And it's as we're all saying, we don't want change. We have a beautiful community. And we all respect each other. And we're all there for each other. We don't need to be part of anything else. And I just want to thank you for all this tonight. And I concur 100% with what everyone has said. And I'm very proud to be a part of Lakeview and my family. Thank you.
Audrey Taylor, I'm not from Lakeview. But at this rate, I'm going to move there. That's really pleasant. I live in District 13. Pam would probably like it if I moved to Lakeview. My question was more, I live in the Kingswood area of Hammond's Plains. My question was more, I'm just looking at the projections for, in terms of residents and growth, and anyone that goes from basically Larry Utech to my neighborhood, your growth projections just don't seem adequate. Like, we can't even get home as it is, right? Like, it takes forever to get home. Like, my wife works downtown, and it's a nightmare. And the worst part isn't the Windsor Street Exchange anymore. Like, that's where it was supposed to be at. Now it's everything along Larry Utech. So we don't have enough arteries as it is. I just think when we're already at the high end of those numbers for voters, 10 years from now, it's going to be way off the scale in those areas. So that was my point of concern. Is just I think that projection is way too low for that area. So yeah, and enjoy Lakeview.
I'm Elizabeth Booth. I'm not from Lakeview, but I am from Fall River. So part of the cousins of the family, maybe not the direct family, but the cousins. And definitely part of the LWF. And now I am officially 2 years living in Fall River, having moved from Ontario. And one of the reasons we chose LWF over being closer to Dartmouth or Halifax was even just touring the area, you got a sense of community. And you got that in LWF. You didn't get that so much in some of the other areas that we were looking for the realtors. So, so I decided to try and get a little bit more involved in the community and see how open everybody was to that involvement. Holy Hannah. You know, you put your hand up for one thing and they'll say, oh, well, you're on that committee? Why don't you come over here? And we got some over here. And hey, let's have a chat over here. And let's have a coffee. Let's go to the Good Times Cafe at, Fall River Road. Let's go. You know. So it's a phenomenal group, and I want to say from the Ontario perspective, the community really is LWF. It's Lakeview, Windsor Junction, Fall River. I had the good fortune of working on the Caluce event this year. Again, LWF participation, right? Actually, I had participation from all over the place, but it's LWF. The archives, just the archives are LWF. We've got the hall that's LWF. And you feel, as you drive through the area, that it's all connected. That it feels like you're all part of the same community. It's the same feel. And it just makes sense from that community, what was the term you used? Community of interest criteria, but that should score super high in comparison to some of the other criteria in terms of population and growth. So that's the Lakeview side of the conversation. I also really think we need to include Waverley, Wellington, Oakfield, Grand Lake. My bakery is in Wellington. You know, it's part, again, it's part of the whole, our infrastructure, our shopping patterns, our business patterns, our churches, our schools, like it's part of that whole side of it. So please look at including those communities as well. So that's all I had on the proposed District E and everything that was, O and everything around it. I do have one thing to say about the proposed District A. Can you look at the travel time for that poor counselor that would be taking care of that area? I mean, you have to set people up to succeed. And by giving them such a vast area of geography to cover, and hey, that geography is not like the geography in Ontario, where you've got lots of highways and quick ways of getting from point A to point B. We're talking about hours of travel for the councillors to cover that territory in District A. So that I understand that it's probably trying to group all like rural under the new definition of rural versus, we're not suburban, we're rural. But District A is just huge from a geography perspective, and being able to serve all those people in those communities, I just can't see that councillor being set up to succeed. And that's it.
My name is Jay Cameron. I lived in the Fall River area for 20 years growing up, and then I moved to the States and started a family and decided, like many other people of my generation, to bring them back and raise them in Fall River because it is such a great place to be. I have a couple things. I didn't write anything beforehand, so I just got crappy little notes here, but I want to respectfully disagree. Oh, sorry, I'm also the chair of the LWF Ratepayers Association. And so to that end, I'd like to respectfully disagree that the proposed boundaries will have no impact on the area rate. I can say firsthand that our area rate has a long-standing and healthy relationship with our councillors, both past and present, and most likely wouldn't exist today without that relationship. And so splitting our area across multiple districts will add a small tax to our volunteers to have to maintain that relationship across multiple councillors. And that's probably not a huge thing, but it is something we have to adjust. And so there would be some kind of tax on our folks there. Like everybody else here, though, the communities of interest topic is what really brought us here to speak tonight. And I don't want anybody on the council to think that we're here to talk about Sackville with distaste, but we're here to talk about our love for our community. And it's a desirable growth area, but one that's pretty sensitive to sprawl, as we're right on that knife's edge between rural and suburban. And I personally can see what has attempted to be done with bringing in parts of Waverley Road into that new district. And in fact, I kind of support that in a sense that as we grow, I hope we grow like those areas and not like what has been looped into our district, like Dartmouth Crossing and that huge commercial sprawl. We're really trying to advocate here tonight to keep that special piece of our district united. And that extends all the way down the old Route 2, like folks here have talked about tonight. Just cleaving it randomly at Fletcher's Lake, I believe, doesn't make a lot of sense. Wellington, Oakfield, Grand Lake, we're all one great big community. So dividing these communities into 3 different districts undermines our ability to advocate for that special love we have for our community. We'll have to be doing it individually or split up into the 3 different pieces rather than today where it's almost a full-time job trying to advocate for the Fall River area. And so I really feel like we'd be at a disadvantage there. Lastly, to echo Elizabeth, that rural District A is just huge. I don't know how a counselor would be able to safely navigate that on a February evening at a community meeting such as this. I don't know what we'd be doing to those communities who already probably have a sense of detachment from the greater Halifax area, to segregate them and single them out and say you are the singular rural district. So I don't like how that feels in my gut. And so yeah, I think everybody did really well here tonight, advocating for beautiful Lakeview and all the other LWF communities, and I hope this feedback is heard and implemented. So, thank you.
I'm now going to call for 3 times for anybody else in the audience. Is there anybody from, we have Marianne McGraw.
My name is Marianne McGraw, and I'm not from Lakeview. But if I ever leave Kearney Lake, I'll tell you where I'm going. I feel a lot of kinship with you folks tonight. We're a very small, historic community, almost 100 years old, tucked against the edge of Kearney Lake, in the old city of Halifax, and have been part of the Birch Cove, Princess Lodge community forever. We have been shoved into proposed Area P, which sort of is an extension of 16. We did poll the community, and we're not opposed to that, strangely. It does separate us from our school district. It separates us from our churches and our traditional community of impact. But the way things are growing where we are, we see a distinct advantage to having Kearney Lake all in one district. The reason for that is recreation pressure, and we're buried in it. We have 60 homes, roughly 150 or less people, not all voters. We host a major community Halifax-sponsored public beach in the summertime, a canoe club of 1,000 members, and we are one of the principal access points for Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lake's unofficial regional park, hopefully soon to be urban national park. And to host all of that in our tiny little community where our streets are 25 feet or less wide is a very difficult challenge for us. And having an now challenge that is shared by the folks at Collins and Bell Street at the opposite end of the lake. We work together on these issues. So being under the leadership of one councillor, we see advantages of. We also see that the major pressure points on the use of our community as a major recreation center are coming from the other growth areas inside that proposed district. So perhaps it will create more of a balance in representation. We are forever hopeful. But the way the districts are drawn in this area, and probably in some other areas in HRM, makes little or no sense to me. The Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area is thousands and thousands and thousands of acres, 5,000 and counting at last look. Why is all of it lumped in one district when it is surrounded by several districts? That means that the representation for such a major recreational resource within HRM falls to one person, but yet the burden of access to that asset is on the surrounding communities. There is absolutely no reason why you can't take a large recreation area like that, or proposed recreation area, and split it relatively equally amongst the surrounding districts. It's all trees, and they don't vote. But those trees can make or break little communities like mine. So what I've provided, and I worked really hard on this, and my background is property law, and I know that it's hard to draw maps for the benefit of the committee, especially through trees. So I looked for things like power lines, the proposed Highway 113, which are known entities, well mapped and articulated on the ground, or on some kind of a survey or map, to provide you with an easy way to divide up all those trees amongst the surrounding communities. Now, I presented this last week at HRM, at the same public hearing at part of the HRM council, district council meeting. And so lo and behold, got a lot of questions about, well, what about this provincial park in my area? What about this regional park in my area? So I think the notion of having councillors adjacent to larger recreation areas like this sharing has probably some merit, not just for us, but for others. But the other thing that happens, the way I drew this, is that the watersheds largely, not completely, but largely are respected. And we are, I would hazard a guess, the last community inside the old city of Halifax that is serviced not by public services, but by well and septic. So what comes down that watershed past our homes is really, really important to us. And having a say in what happens upstream from us is really important. So to have that represented by a different councillor who may or may not have, I can't be running in two different directions to try and say, well, the watershed that you're proposing to do something with over here is going to impact these people down here. So I leave you with that. Thank you for your time. And this is the best contentious public meeting I've ever been to in my life. You people are amazing.
Can I ask you, I'd like to just ask a question of clarification.
Marianne, if you wouldn't mind, Tim would like to
Marianne
ask.
and I go way back and we've agreed on a lot of things. So, me being B, you don't think Birch Cove should be represented by one person? Birch Cove, Blue Mountain.
Birch Cove is. Oh,
the park.
Oh, no.
But you think Kearney Lake should be?
Different situation, and I've tried very hard to explain that. This is a major asset.
Yeah.
And to have one councillor bear that responsibility that's a lot to ask. Particularly when they won't be attuned to the effects on the opposite side of it.
Right. My question was, and I just, obviously, parts of Kearney Lake I represent, parts of Catherine does, probably Russell. I find having two councillors allying together on an issue could be good. So I'm just sort of wondering, and I don't want to debate with you, but I've known you a long time. It's just almost contradictory to say this area should be represented by one person, but this person, I don't want this area represented by one person only.
The lake is a small place relative to Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes. And the issues that affect the streets at both ends are extremely similar, if not exactly the same.
No question.
And the consequent effects of the park, the unofficial park, on our communities are exactly the same. But they are different from the folks on the Timberley side, the folks in Beachville, and even sometimes the folks in Hammond's Plains. So the effect of that land and how its use folds out is going to differ depending on what community you're in and how you're affected by it. So the park itself, I don't think anybody will ever argue about safeguarding, but it's how that impacts its adjacent neighbors that's different.
But as far as Kearney Lake, it won't be relevant, it won't affect me, but I would think having two voices protecting Kearney Lake versus one would be better.
Maybe. I don't disagree with you, but as I say, we had a meeting, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the community.
Yeah.
If it were up to me, I'd stay with Birch Cove.
Yeah.
I've been part of this community for 60 years, and I'd stay there. But I speak for a community.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I just found it a little confusing.
Yeah. There are different opinions on both sides. We're willing to try something different.
Yep.
If we don't like it, we'll be back in 8 years.
I don't doubt that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Councillor Outfit. Are there any other speakers who would wish to say something? And would you mind giving your name and the community in which you reside?
Sure. My name is Pat Clahane. I live on the Waverley Road, a little bit toward Dartmouth, but I'm in District 1. And I would like to speak on the boundaries question. First of all, I would like to endorse what Barry said as a proposed boundary reconfiguration, or more in the sense of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, when we're speaking about the natural geographically based boundary that begins around the outflow of Lake Charles, because the rest of the Shubenacadie waterway drains toward the harbor. But Lake Charles to the county line up around Oakfield Grand Lake is all draining in that direction, and the Mi'kmaq knew that too, which is why that was a defined district for them. For us, it's not only a geographically sensible thing, but it reflects a development of a strong community character and a collaboration that I've seen. I grew up in there, so I was 67, and all but about 5 of those years in pretty much the same place. And through that period of time, I saw the communities along the Shubenacadie waterway evolve from competitive silos to points of pride that are extremely collaborative with each other. So any piece of infrastructure, any institution, any community service group, religious organization, sports group that springs up in one spot becomes an asset to the other. And most importantly, and to me in post-pandemic times, this is so important. The frail social fabric that we've got now, and I'm active in the volunteer sector, and what I really see is we are hanging on. People are having a hard time just getting things going again. There's a lot of divisiveness we all see in the world around us, and it plays out at the local community level in terms of folks who are either just exhausted or disconnected, and that's not healthy. We all know that, and HRMs, recreation people, and volunteer development people have been doing great work trying to help us to get the fabric back together again. So what I see from this initiative, and what I would hope would be pointed out to the UARB, is whatever good we manage to accomplish at putting Band-Aids on things and putting people back together and getting volunteer groups rolling again and getting kids back into sports and rebuilding volunteer groups, that if it works, what we're planting now will sprout into activity about when? Like, when will people be healthy? About 2023, 2024. So we're setting ourselves up to have to reinvent a wheel that's got a lot of punctures in it right now. So that's what motivates me to take the unusual step of showing up at a public meeting on a subject like this. I mentioned what I think the boundary definition should be, which is, and I didn't even talk to Barry on this subject ever, but he nailed it. He always knows what he's talking about. And I want to use a term that is not an official government phrase or a label on a sign, but I suspect even the people who are from District 1 but not from Lakeview will recognize the word River Lakes. Is that familiar to you? Okay. River Lakes is the self-name that our communities give to ourselves as a whole. So think what that means if instead of Waverly fighting Fall River to find out who's going to have the, I don't know, highest telephone pole or whatnot, it's we cheer. I mean, we may fight over the phone pole, but ultimately, whoever gets it, the other one's going to climb the pole, which is why the Fall River Calouse is really well attended by Waverly, and why the Waverly concerts are jam-packed, full of people from Oakfield, Wellington, Winter Junction, Fall River, the whole show. So River Lakes, when we're working in the volunteer sector or businesses, want to put a word on that audience or that potential pool of volunteers and participants, that's the word they use. So I'm asking you to keep River Lakes together, and it includes Winter Junction and certainly Lakeview. On the subject of community interest, I'd like to point out that the president of the Waverly Legion for several years going into the pandemic lived in Wellington. The co-chair of the Waverly Museum lived on Grand Lake Drive in Wellington. And if somebody's having a meeting anywhere down the line, they do shop at the Wellington Bakery. And Janet Lugar Miller of Lakeview was the first person to volunteer to wash dishes at the Waverly Heritage Tea. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We had some difficulty interpreting your last name, so would you mind spelling it?
Sure. Clahane, C-L-A-H-A-N-E. And I live in the Waverly Road, right beside folks who are third-generation agricultural people still doing that in our not-suburban area.
Walter Reagan, Sackville. My question to the committee, is it possible to get a third counselor for Sackville? Because I think it's time we have a third counselor. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. That's an interesting concept.
Big tax increase, Walter.
Are there any further speakers? Are there any further speakers? Is there anybody else in the room who wishes to come to the mic? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to reach out to my council colleagues and ask for questions of clarification from the colleagues. Councillor, I think you were the first one who mentioned it, so you go first, and then Councillor Dagley.
I'm going to put my friends Liam and Ian on the spot, I guess, because I have some pretty grave concerns about District 16 and...
Just a reminder that this is for questions of clarification and not debate.
Yeah. So I'm clarifying what exactly you're proposing to do with District 16 and P there, because when it comes to community of interest, I'm very concerned that we're splitting Bedford and West Bedford, most of it, where all the community of interest is, the community centers, the rinks, the schools, the artificial turf field, the performing arts center, where what I hope would happen is the folks at Larry UTEC and Royal Hemlocks, etc., who never felt they were really part of Bedford anyway, might be better off going to somewhere else, although I would miss them, and whatnot. But I'm quite concerned about what's happening to splitting the community of interest of Bedford.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for the question. The proposed District D does incorporate sort of the areas of Old Bedford. It goes along Kearney Lake Road and continues westerly through Washington Lake, Charlie's Lake, Kearney Lake, connecting with the Bedford community boundary. I think in terms of the split, it was it's not really it's a very difficult sort of position for the panel because of the amount of growth that you have in that area.
Sure.
Right? So that's when looking at it, they were really trying to center those boundary lines on existing community boundaries and school planning boundaries and within the planning boundaries, and trying to make the population in terms of numbers of electors jive in terms of that.
And I guess my worry is we're looking at the numbers. So to be plain and simple, will the school, the community center, the artificial turf field, the rinks, still be in Bedford?
In which area, sorry?
It would, above 102.
Above.
Gary Martin Drive, Hammond's Plains
Yes.
will go to Ann, and so the Hammond's Plains Road will stay within the community of Hammond's Plains, splitting Bedford, West Bedford, right? So that area of Gary Martin Drive will no longer be with District P, according to this proposal.
Correct. So that has absolutely destroyed the community of interest.
Just a reminder that this is for questions of clarification.
But I'm clarifying, but while saying we're respecting community of interest, we're taking the school, the community center, the rinks, the artificial turf out of the district.
In this proposal, that is what is being proposed and is going for public feedback. So those comments are important for us to have and we'll get our report back to the district review panel. The short answer is absolutely, that is the proposal that is being put forward, and maybe a suggestion.
God's name are we thinking?
Because the district review panel has to look at all 5 of the criteria from the NSUERB, of which community of interest is 1 of 5. To be clear, none of these criteria are given a ranking or an order. They are a 1 to 5. 2 of those criteria deal with population and electoral population only.
Understood.
So 2 of the 3 are specific to population. What has been brought forward in front of you today is a proposal that tries to take all 5 of those criteria, and as we've heard from many people today and throughout many of our meetings, makes a compromise that is complicated for everybody on the 5 criteria.
My point, Ian, is that I want this clarification that there are other areas that can come out of it. And the new library and the new ferry terminal and whatnot wouldn't be in Bedford for those folks in West Bedford. That wouldn't be in the district. The community of interest is not recognized in this present proposal. And I think we better have another look at this and look at what could be done with Royal Hemlocks, with Liberty Tech, with Fernley Park, etc. Respectfully, and like Barry said, not easy, and I was on committees before, but you have taken the community of interest and torn it in half. And we cannot
Is that the question?
And that's a comment, and you realize that that's what's happened.
We have heard you, Councillor, and that is what we are coming to these meetings to try to hear from.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Outfit. Go ahead, Councillor Daigle Gammon, for questions of clarification that sound more like questions.
I've been trying to figure out how to ask you this, it's questions of clarification, so it's not really to say how impressed I am to represent District 1 and how pleased I am at the turnout here tonight. So I'm not allowed to ask that, right? Or say that. So I do have some questions of clarification. In the proposed District A, the plus or minus is at 14 point something %. And so if you want to stay within the plus or minus 10%, why take Lakeview out of District A? Because then you're exceeding that 10%. And if you looked at the population of the electoral, could you put Lakeview, Wellington, Grand Lake, Oakfield back, and then get the percentage to maybe within the 10% range for the new District A, and have District E then having a higher number instead of. So if you're doing it just by the numbers, then why could that happen, I guess, is my question.
Councillor, I want to be super clear on this for any of the questions about the possibilities. One of the things that we're incredibly proud of is that we are doing this with the resident review panel, and they will get a what we heard report based on the public feedback from these meetings, and they will hear the consideration of what was said at these meetings. And I'm not going to predispose any of their decisions because they have very, very hard ones, and I want to make sure I'm supporting them for that. That being said, I do think that there is a possibility in looking at the numbers and the size of Lakeview, as long as we can look at the justifications and that. I think it was a very clear message today, and that is being brought forward, and the committee will have a chance to hear from that and make the decision when the final recommendations to executive committee come forward.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad it was heard. The second thing would be, there's no priority given to the 5 criteria that are used. So what is the method, or how does council, for the next time we do this, so we don't have to come back again and again and again, how do we, is it another motion of council to say that for the next boundary review, we need to prioritize the criteria and community of interest should be rated first, second, or third, or how we can do that? So is that a motion of council, or does that belong with the UARB board because it is mandated by the province to do it?
So that process is owned and is mandated by the government of Nova Scotia through the NSCRB's process. That being said, and we are going through with this process, as it is the first time we have ever done a resident panel for this type of review, we are looking at many lessons learned, including some things that we can provide back on potential options for the program to make sure that our lessons learned are communicated to other people who may be involved in this process as well. I also think that what I'm trying to say, probably a little bit not clear enough, is that we will be providing feedback on the process to the NSUARB and asking for some options of how we can do things in the future, and looking at ways we can do that, and maybe through a policy and maybe through some other actions. But we are going to be going and talking with our colleagues from legal to make sure we know exactly what the possibilities are after this process.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So there will be a public hearing at the UARB board. Would that as well then be an opportunity for the community to say that they want to see a prioritization of those 5 criteria?
I cannot speak specifically to what the board would be willing to listen to, what they would not be. That's not my ability to say, but there will be a public meeting that is held on this at the NSUARB. I believe that would be possible, but I want to say for sure because they have the rules as well, which I'm not clear on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Daigle Gammon, for those questions that sounded like questions. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm actually going to raise a point of order. And my point of order is that this is not a public hearing. Now, I can sit here and have my 5 minutes, or I can go over to that and I can have my 5 minutes. Which would you prefer?
Your 5 minutes have started.
Excellent, thank you. So, can we please go back to slide 35? So in slide 35, when I look at this proposed district, in the first bullet at the end of that sentence, it says in a portion of Halifax West. Can you explain to me what Halifax West is? Because I understand that that is a federal boundary. Halifax West extends all the way to Hubbards, right? So if you think about it from a western area of Halifax.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, for the question. Halifax West is referring to the sort of Clayton Park area
Clayton Park West?
Lakeside, Beachville, Otter Lake, and a portion of Halifax West. So that Clayton Park West, that's
right. So this is the, just known as District 12, which was, or has been known as BLT.
Yep.
And so we're taking the T out, we're taking Timberley out. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to that, because the communities of interest of Beachville, Lakeside, Timberley have been together for a very long time.
So again, part of the, and I don't want to rephrase Ian's answer that he provided there before, but it was sort of the ranking. They're taking a portion of the T out of the BLT, not the entire T. And really what it boiled down to as well was not ranking, but considering all of those factors and coming up with a proposal that strives or considers those communities of interest, but also maintains the other factors like low parity and.
So what we've done for that district is we've essentially created population 21,484 of electors, and yet in the other larger districts such as J and K and N, we've got well over 25,000, 26,000. Now I understand we're only talking about electors, but we don't understand the numbers of residents, right? I don't care if somebody can vote or not vote. They're in my district, I'm going to represent them. And so I think it's really important for us as counselors and for residents to understand when they look at these numbers, what is the population of that district? Because if I think about electors of being 26,000 for N, which is the Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville, Middle Sackville, Lucasville, Upper Hammonds Plains, and a little bit, I think, of West Bedford area. And we have a district of 29,000. I want to thank Cordray Taylor for raising this issue, because there is no way that that is going to stay under 32,000 residents. So you're already way at the top as far as being able to actually represent effectively from an equity perspective.
So I heard a comment earlier on the growth numbers as well, which I want to take this opportunity to address. So the growth numbers were provided to us through our colleagues with planning, looking at their projected numbers based on the areas. So it was based off of our internal planning areas and looking at the special planning districts. So I wanted to be clear where those numbers came from. And to be very frank about saying, as is documented, Halifax is seeing unprecedented growth. And unprecedented growth at rates that have increased higher than people thought unprecedented growth was, from my understanding of it. So the application to the NSUARB needs to include the existing electoral count. We have provided growth areas and growth populations because of this growth and because of this rapid growth to try to make recommendations that are going to stand a bit of a test of time. We have to do this every 8 years. So we want to put that forward, but we can't use those growth numbers for our recommendations moving forward on this.
So the one thing within those growth numbers that we do not know and that we cannot know is the level of as-of-right development, which we've included shared housing now. We have backyard suites, we have in-law suites. So just wanted to make sure that we are aware.
I would just like to make sure that this is a question of
Yeah,
clarification.
Just get to that question mark, 1 second. I just want to make sure that those as-of-right developments have been considered in this elector and population growth numbers. Thank you.
We have provided the potential growth numbers based on the information we received from our colleagues within our planning areas, looking at the information they have and their estimated developments moving forward for the next 8 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Othedican.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. You clarified quite well about the 10% variance, and that makes sense to me. But there's also this 25% opportunity, if you will, that I think could be used in the name of protecting communities of interest. I guess, do you have the ability, and I've talked with some folks at the council and also some committee members and whatnot, just to go back and say, you know what, UARB, we really can't do exactly what you want, so we are going to have to have you on 20 or 25% or 18% or something. do you need to go back to them and say, you know, we do want a little bit of weighting, we do want of the priorities, we do want to have a little more flexibility with the 10%. Do you have that ability? Because as Barry Dalrymple said last time, everything you did, we did as an HRM, which I'm glad. I left the committee, most of my colleagues wanted the same number of councillors or more. And it was a horrible experience. So the UIRB did throw it out. I don't want them to do that to you again, because I think you guys are going to be trying to do this properly. But should you circle back with them and say, we're getting pushback on community interest, how carved in stone is this 10% and the leeway with the 25?
The NSUARB is clear that we have the plus or minus 10%, but we can go up to the plus or minus 25. So I just want to confirm what I heard from your question, that you were speaking to that 25% correction. You were talking about 30 or 40.
No,
Perfect.
But it's, you know.
That was my question of clarification.
Okay.
So with this, we have that ability to go to 25%. But as Liam said in the presentation, it has to be through justification. The NSUARB is clear in their handbook on how to do this process and in their recommendations on how to do this process that it has to be based off of actual community engagement and public feedback. Everything we've been doing for the last 6 months has been trying to get that. Every one of these people in this building today that have come to speak to this have provided a passionate approach to their communities of interest, which has been heard by us, will be documented in the minutes, and is going to be a part of those justifications when we get to those places, and the resident review panel believes that that community of interest feedback is the rating that has to be considered and has to be put part of it. And the only way to do that is through tangible feedback, and tangible feedback from the community. And that's what I, quite frankly, this is my fourth one of these, I think, in different municipalities. Haven't heard any more louder than today. So I'm excited to see how actual public sentiment can build in those justifications and see where this gets us.
My concern is you only heard it today from one community, but there's others there. But hopefully you'll listen to me from my community as well. But my main thing is that I just wanted to make sure that you had that flexibility and that community of interest was fodder for you to defend that flexibility.
Thanks very much, Councillor. And this is just my plug to all the folks that are in this room tonight, and maybe their neighbors or anybody that's listening, that please check out the District Boundary Review website and fill out our survey as well, too, because it's other ways to engage. And to underscore Ian's point, that's very, very important.
And thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Oh, sorry, are there other questions?
I don't see anybody else asking for questions, and you haven't spoken yet. So.
Well, no, and I just wanted to.
Just a reminder.
I just wanted to address that for my council colleagues and folks in the room. I'm just sort of laying back and not saying anything. It's not because I don't care. It's because it's the third time I've been at this meeting, and Liam has heard all of my questions and answered all my questions. So I'm just here to take it all in. So, so I just wanted to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Blackburn.
One more, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is my second public session, and thank you for the work that you've done to engage with community. We heard loud and clear the Lucasville session that the section of the Hannah's Plains Road in Bedford area should not be included, that the Brookline subdivision should not be included. And most of that is because of the surface area and the surface boundary with regards to well versus piped water and piped sewage. And it really does come down to access to services or lack thereof. And so I guess when I look at this, I just wanted to raise a question around the National Urban Park, because I think what Marianne has raised is really important, because that is such an important asset with various different access points throughout the Halifax West area, in Hannah's Plains, in Timberley, in Upper Tantallon, Stillwater Lake, Bedford, Kearney Lake, and so on, that I would think that it should be divided in the way that it is right now and shared amongst a number of councillors. And so I just wanted to show support for that. Thank you.
That doesn't sound like a question of clarification.
And point of order, this is not a public hearing.
Clarify something. No, I would point out though that we are meant to limit members' responses to questions for clarification, not for comments at this public presentation. Even though it's not here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, they're
So, with that, I would like to thank everybody for coming out and sharing your views on, on what the boundaries should look like and your concerns with them. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Liam and Ian, and to the rest of the boundary review panel for the intense amount of work that you have done over the past number of months to be able to present this in some sort of coherent fashion.